My guardian said my daughter couldn't come to Easter because kids are too loud. When I arrived, I saw my cousin's kids running around the house. They said, "It's different." So I quietly left. Days later, they were begging for money, but I turned them down. I, 32M, never thought my guardians would choose favorites so blatantly, but Easter 2024 opened my eyes to something I'd been blind to for years. What started as a simple family gathering turned into the moment I realized where I truly stood in their hierarchy, and more importantly, where my 5-year-old daughter stood. My guardians raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. They took me in, gave me a roof over my head, and I spent the next 20 years believing they loved me like their own son. I was grateful. Hell, I was more than grateful. I was devoted. When they needed help with house repairs, I was there. When they had medical bills, I helped cover them. When their car broke down, I co-signed for a new one. I thought we were family. The call came 3 days before Easter. My guardian called to tell me about the family dinner they were hosting. I was excited because it had been months since we'd all gotten together, and my daughter had been asking when she could see her grandparents again. That's when the conversation took a turn I wasn't expecting. My guardian explained that this year would be different. They wanted a peaceful, adult-oriented gathering. Kids were too loud, too disruptive, and they were getting older and needed quiet. My daughter couldn't come. I felt my stomach drop, but I tried to understand. Maybe they really were feeling overwhelmed by noise. Maybe this was just about wanting a calm holiday for once. I asked if this was a new rule for everyone, and my guardian assured me it was. No kids this year, period. I reluctantly agreed, though explaining to my daughter why she couldn't come to Easter dinner was one of the hardest conversations I'd had in years. She cried, asking what she'd done wrong. I told her nothing, that sometimes grown-ups just needed quiet time. I arranged for her to spend Easter with her mother's parents instead. Easter Sunday arrived gray and drizzly. I drove the familiar route to my guardian's house, the same route I'd taken hundreds of times over the years. I had brought flowers for my guardian and a bottle of wine, trying to make the best of what felt like an incomplete celebration without my daughter. I parked in the driveway and walked toward the front door, already hearing sounds from inside. But these weren't the sounds of quiet adult conversation. These were the unmistakable sounds of children playing, laughing, running, shouting. My hand froze on the doorbell. Through the window, I could see into the living room. 3 kids were chasing each other around the coffee table while adults sat on the couch, wine glasses in hand, completely unbothered by the noise. I recognized those kids immediately. They belonged to my cousin, my guardian's biological nephew. The same cousin who lived 2 states away and visited maybe twice a year. I stood there for a full minute, trying to process what I was seeing. The no kids rule apparently had some very specific exceptions. I rang the doorbell, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. My guardian opened the door with a big smile, hugging me and taking the flowers. She thanked me for coming and ushered me inside, where the chaos was even more apparent. The kids were loud, louder than my daughter had ever been at family gatherings. One was jumping on the couch, while another was banging wooden spoons against pots in what I assumed was some kind of game. I couldn't help myself. I asked about the no kids rule, gesturing toward the obvious contradiction playing out in front of me. My guardian's expression shifted slightly, and she explained that this was different. These kids were visiting from out of state, and it would have been rude to exclude them. Family was important, she said, and sometimes exceptions had to be made. The word family hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to ask what that made my daughter and me, but I already knew the answer. We were the kind of family that rules applied to, not the kind that exceptions were made for. I stayed for exactly 47 minutes. I made polite conversation, complimented the food, and played the role of the grateful adopted son one last time. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. 20 years of believing I belonged somewhere had crumbled in less than an hour. When I left, I told them I had to pick up my daughter early. No one seemed particularly disappointed to see me go. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying every interaction from the past few years, looking for signs I'd missed. They were everywhere once I started looking. The next few weeks passed quietly. I didn't call to check in like I usually did. I didn't stop by to help with yard work. I didn't send my usual text updates about my daughter's school activities. For the first time in 2 decades, I created distance between us, and honestly, it felt liberating. Update 1. 3 weeks after Easter, my phone rang. It was my guardian, and her voice had an urgency I hadn't heard before. She explained that they were facing a financial emergency. Their roof had developed a major leak during the recent storms, and the damage was extensive. The insurance company was being difficult, and they needed immediate repairs to prevent further damage to the house. She asked if I could help with a loan, $15,000 to cover the emergency repairs and temporary housing while the work was being done. In the past, I wouldn't have hesitated. I had helped them financially numerous times over the years, always happy to support the people who had supported me. But this time was different. I found myself thinking about Easter, about my daughter's tears, about the sound of other children playing in a house where mine wasn't welcome. I told my guardian I needed to think about it and would call her back. I spent that evening going through my finances, not to see if I could afford to help, but to calculate exactly how much I had given them over the years. The number was staggering. Between direct loans, co-signing for their car, helping with medical bills, and covering various emergencies, I had given them over $60,000 in the past 5 years alone. Money I had saved for my daughter's college fund, money that could have gone toward a better house for us, money that represented years of overtime and careful budgeting. The next day, I called my guardian back. I told her I couldn't help with the loan. I explained that I was restructuring my finances to focus on my daughter's future and couldn't take on any more financial commitments. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. She asked if this was about Easter, if I was still upset about the kid situation. I told her it wasn't about being upset. It was about understanding where priorities lay. She tried to explain again that the situation with my cousin's kids was different, that I was being unreasonable and holding a grudge over something small. That's when I finally said what I should have said weeks earlier. I told her that if my daughter wasn't family enough to be included in Easter dinner, then I wasn't family enough to be their emergency financial backup. The conversation ended abruptly after that. Update 2. Word traveled fast through our family network. Within days, I was getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in months, all trying to mediate the situation. My cousin, the same one whose kids had been welcome at Easter, called to tell me I was being petty and that family should help family in times of need. I asked him if he would be contributing to the roof repair fund, given his strong feelings about family obligations. He explained that his financial situation was tight right now, but that was different because I had always been the one with the stable job and savings. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was expected to be family when money was needed, but not when my daughter wanted to attend a holiday dinner. My guardian called several more times over the next 2 weeks, each conversation following the same pattern. She would start by asking about the loan, then move to guilt about abandoning family in their time of need, and finally end with promises that things would be different in the future. She assured me that next year, all the grandchildren would be included in holiday celebrations. I pointed out that my daughter had always been included before, so what exactly would be different? She couldn't give me a straight answer. The truth was becoming clearer with each conversation. I had been tolerated as long as I was useful, but I had never truly been considered equal family. The financial pressure on them was clearly mounting. I heard through other relatives that they had applied for multiple loans and been denied. Their credit wasn't great, partly because of previous financial difficulties I had helped them through. They were facing the possibility of significant damage to their home if repairs weren't made soon. Part of me felt guilty. These were the people who had raised me, who had given me a home when I needed one most. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being taken for granted, reminded me that they had made their choice on Easter. They had shown me exactly where my daughter and I ranked in their priorities. Update 3. 2 months after Easter, I got a call that changed everything. My guardian was in the hospital. She had fallen while trying to move furniture to protect it from the ongoing roof leak, and she had broken her hip. My first instinct was to rush to the hospital, to be there for her like I always had been. But when I arrived, I found my cousin already there, along with several other relatives I rarely saw except at funerals and weddings. They had all rallied around the crisis, offering emotional support and promises to help however they could. I noticed, however, that none of them were offering the kind of concrete financial assistance that had always been expected from me. My guardian looked frail in the hospital bed, older than I had ever seen her. When she saw me, she started crying and apologizing. She admitted that the Easter situation had been handled poorly, that she had made a mistake in excluding my daughter. She begged me to forgive her and help them through this crisis. I sat with her for hours that day, holding her hand and listening to her talk about regrets and family and the fear of losing their home. It would have been easy to give in, to write the check and go back to the way things had always been. But I kept thinking about my daughter, about the lesson I would be teaching her if I showed her that family loyalty was a one-way street. I told my guardian that I forgave her, because I did. But I also told her that forgiveness didn't mean going back to old patterns. I explained that I needed to prioritize my daughter's future and couldn't continue to be their financial safety net. I offered to help them find resources, government assistance programs, charity organizations, family members who hadn't contributed in the past, but I wouldn't be writing any more checks. The conversation was painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I was setting boundaries with the people who had raised me. I was choosing my daughter's future over their immediate needs, and while it felt selfish, it also felt necessary. Final update. 6 months have passed since Easter, and the dust has finally settled. My guardians eventually found a way to finance their roof repairs through a combination of a home equity loan and help from relatives who had previously been absent from their financial crises. The work took longer than expected, and they had to live in a rental for 2 months, but their house is now repaired and they're back home. Our relationship has changed fundamentally. We still talk, but the dynamic is different. I'm no longer the first person they call when something goes wrong, and I'm no longer expected to solve every financial crisis. It's been an adjustment for all of us, but it's also been healthy. My daughter and I have started our own holiday traditions. Last Christmas, we volunteered at a local shelter, and this past Easter, we had dinner with her maternal grandparents, who were delighted to include both of us in their celebration. She's happier, and so am I. The money I would have spent on their roof repair went into my daughter's college fund instead. She's only 5, but she already has enough saved to cover her first 2 years of college. Every time I make a deposit into that account, I think about the choice I made and feel confident it was the right one. I learned something important through all of this. Being grateful for what someone did for you in the past doesn't mean you owe them your future. My guardians gave me a home when I needed one, and I'll always be thankful for that. But that debt was paid long ago through years of financial support and emotional devotion. I don't owe them my daughter's inheritance or my own financial security. The hardest part has been accepting that some family relationships are transactional, even when you don't want them to be. My guardians loved me, but they loved what I could provide for them more. When I stopped providing it, the relationship changed, and that told me everything I needed to know about where I really stood. My daughter will grow up knowing that she comes first in my life, that her place in our family isn't conditional on her usefulness or convenience. She'll learn that love isn't about keeping score, but she'll also learn that respect is earned and boundaries are healthy. Sometimes the best thing you can do for family is to stop enabling them to take you for granted. It's a lesson I wish I had learned 20 years ago, but I'm grateful I learned it when I did. My daughter deserves a father who values himself enough to demand the same respect he gives, and she deserves to see what healthy family relationships look like. The people who truly love you will still be there when you stop being useful to them. Everyone else was just using you, and it's better to know the difference.